really metabolic health is the sum of all of the chemical reactions occurring in your body. So that's all of your hormone functions. That's all of your neurotransmitter functions. That's all of your digestive capacity, in addition to just your energy regulation and, how many calories you're burning, how much cellular energy you have to work out and to think, critically thinking, any of those kinds of things. All of the chemical reactions that are occurring in our body are part of metabolic health. So that really taps into cardiovascular health, thyroid health, reproductive health. I mean, kind of you name it, metabolic health is involved in every aspect of health.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Andrea Nicholson, and Andrea helps driven, successful people struggling with poor metabolic function, gut health imbalances, and low energy to achieve health and abundant energy. With over a decade of experience in the health industry, training as a nutrition therapist master and a restorative wellness practitioner, she creates personalized packages for clients using functional testing and other cutting-edge technologies to uncover underlying imbalances and provides them with the tools they need to navigate their unique needs. And today on the show, we are talking all about metabolic health. We're talking about blood sugar and insulin and why that's important for everyone, not just for those with diabetes, what it really means to take control of your metabolic health, and what you can do to really repair your metabolic health in your own life. And just a lot of tangible tips and takeaways here, talking about macros and really healthy insulin levels and what that looks like in your body. So a lot of really great advice and tips here from Andrea. Let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Andrea Nicholson, and we are talking all about metabolic function today. And this is kind of her forte. And I'm excited to bring this conversation because when we talk about health and all the wellness things, metabolic health isn't really something we'd covered on the show, which is I was just telling Andrea, I'm really glad to kind of bring this conversation to light. So thanks so much for joining me today, Andrea.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think it's a big topic that isn't talked about enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. So let's kind of start, I kind of like to start with the basics here, just kind of give people like terminology and stuff, right? So when we're talking about metabolic health, what does that really mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions around this, and it's a big topic. So I understand why there's a lot of misconceptions. Most of us know the word metabolism, and we think of that as like how many calories we're burning in a day. And that is a portion of it. But really, metabolic health is the sum of all of the chemical reactions occurring in your body. So that's all of your hormone functions. That's all of your neurotransmitter functions. That's all of your digestive capacity, in addition to just your energy regulation and, how many calories you're burning, how much cellular energy you have to work out and to critically thinking, any of those kinds of things. All of the chemical reactions that are occurring in our body are part of metabolic health. So that really taps into cardiovascular health, thyroid health, reproductive health. I mean, kind of you name it, metabolic health is involved in every aspect of health.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think, like you said, I do think there's a lot of misconceptions because I think too, when people hear the word like the words metabolism and blood sugar and that kind of thing, they maybe think it doesn't apply to them, right? Like we hear the term like blood sugar and insulin and people think you're talking about diabetes, but it's important for people that don't have diabetes as well. So I guess let's kind of go that direction and why is focusing on blood sugar and insulin and blood sugar regulation and all of those things, what's the importance of that for like everyone, everybody, not just people with diabetes?
Yeah, blood sugar literally impacts every cell in your body. It's not just about whether or not you're diabetic or whether or not you have really high blood sugars or really low blood sugars or swinging in between. It literally is affecting every cell in your body. Both high blood sugars and low blood sugars are toxic to the body, and they can cause inflammation. They can cause problems with just how well you utilize the foods that you're taking in. It affects how well you can detoxify. It affects how well your immune system works. It affects literally, like we were just talking about with, why this metabolic health is such a big deal. It affects every system in the body. So if you have, blood pressure dysregulation, or if you have low energy periods throughout the day, or if you have even anxiety and depression and some mental health conditions are very directly related to blood sugar regulation. If you have infertility or any, of the hormone imbalances or sexual dysfunctions that can occur, a lot of those also come back to blood sugar dysregulation. It really affects brain health. It affects bone health, how well you can build muscle. It really is the thing that affects everything else. It's kind of the foundational piece to all of those systems working right. Now, of course, there's other things that can also go wrong in all of those systems. But no matter what you do, if your blood sugar is out of whack, no other fix will fix whatever your problem is until you also deal with the blood sugar. So for me, it's kind of like step one because it's foundational to all of the rest of your health.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. And I guess for people who maybe don't know that they have, dysregulation with their blood sugar, their insulin or whatever, what are some signs or symptoms that might show up to show you that, like, hey, you need to get a hold of your blood sugar?
Yeah, it really can show up in a lot of different ways. You could have some of the classic blood sugar symptoms, like if you have low blood sugar, a lot of people will get shaky and weak or nauseous if they don't eat or if they don't eat often. So that's kind of one of the classic symptoms. There really aren't very many direct symptoms of high blood sugar. That shows up when you have the insulin resistance due to having high blood sugars all the time. That shows up in the hypertension, in the hormone dysregulations, all of those other issues that we've already talked about. So there aren't really any symptoms of high blood sugars. That's part of the reason why this is such a big deal to actively pay attention to, because you probably won't feel it.
Right.
Without testing, you might not know that this is a problem.
Or if it's like you were talking about, hormonal imbalances, it just goes unchecked because you think, oh, it's just my hormones. And really the root cause is it's the blood sugar issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So say you do the testing or, whatever, and you do find out that you have some sort of blood sugar dysregulation, or like maybe you're trending towards insulin resistance or you are insulin resistant. How do you flip that? Like what steps to kind of turn that around?
Yeah, diet is going to be foundational to fixing blood sugar issues because blood sugar is primarily driven by what we eat. And within that, it's primarily driven by how many carbohydrates you're eating because that has the biggest impact on blood sugar. Carbohydrates are sugar. So that's the biggest driver. And specifically the simple sugars and the refined carbohydrates, the breads and pastas and cookies and cakes and all the things that we all love. Those are the things that are driving blood sugar the most. But it's also affected by the types of fats that you consume, how much fat you consume, how much protein you consume, the quality of the proteins that you're consuming. So really, we have to dial in that diet to find the sweet spot for you so that you have the widest range of foods that your body can tolerate, because that's going to be different for everybody. Some people are very resistant to carbohydrates, and so they just naturally have higher reactions to them. Other people are not so resistant to it, and they can actually have more carbohydrates. So we have to dial that in for you. The second part of it is, the rest of your lifestyle factors. Stress is a huge driver of blood sugar dysregulation, of all of the problems associated with blood sugar, because cortisol, one of the main stress hormones, actually causes your body to release sugar. And if you think about that, if you think of from the biological aspect of why would that happen, well, your body is perceiving a threat that you either need to run away from or fight against or, do some action against. And so you need that added sugar to be able to fight or to flee. Now, most of us today aren't really running from, we're not running from tigers. We're not physically needing to get away from our stressors. We more often sit and stew in them, but the body doesn't know that. So you're still getting this huge surge of sugar that you don't really need. Well, that's contributing to insulin resistance because every time your blood sugar goes up, your body will release more insulin to deal with that sugar because the high sugar can be toxic. And it's useless when it's just floating around in the blood.
Yep.
It's just causing damage in the blood. We have to actually get it into the cell, and that's where insulin comes in. So we have to obviously manage your diet. We have to manage your stress, but we also have to look at exercise. How much are you getting? How often? What kinds? Is it too intense? Is it too much? Are you pushing too hard and causing stress? Or are you too sedentary? Both ends of the spectrum here are also problematic. And we have to look at things like sleep and hydration. And, there's a whole host of things that we really have to look at to dial back in insulin resistance and lower the overall levels of both insulin and blood sugar.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to unpack some of that. I was like jotting down notes when you were talking because I like a lot of the things you were saying to like kind of dive deeper into. And the first thing you said was you were talking about the carbs and like being able to determine what's best for you. Because like you said, some people are more sensitive to carbs than others. So, making a blanket statement, I know a lot of people think like, oh, I just need to be on a low carb diet and that's going to keep my blood sugar stable. But like you're saying, everybody's different and everybody's body is going to react to things differently. And so, a low carb diet isn't really the way to go for everybody. That's not like the answer to regulating your blood sugar.
Absolutely. I would say that there isn't really a great definition of what a low carb diet means.
Totally.
That's part of the other problem with this whole thing is you've got a boatload of different definitions for keto and low carb and ketovore and carnivore and all the things. There's all these terms that don't really have strict definitions around them. I would say that the vast majority of people would benefit by cutting their carbs.
Sure.
It doesn't mean you have to go to a full low carb or ketogenic diet, but the average person is eating like 250 to 300 grams of carbs per day. We don't need anywhere near that much. Most people do better staying under, say, 150 grams a day. Some need to go under 100. Some really do need to go all the way to the ketogenic style where it's like under 20 grams of carbs a day. But generally speaking, most people don't need to go that far, that long. Once you kind of repair things, a lot of people can add some of the carbs back in. So that's where that individuality really has to play in. But I would say that the vast majority of people probably do need to cut their carbs. They just don't necessarily need to go full low carb.
Full on. Right. Well, and like you were saying too, it's also like the quality of the carbs, right? Like the simple carbs are going to do a lot. They're going to affect your body a lot differently than eating like those complex, like, starchy veggies and, ancient grains, like that kind of thing. It's going to be a totally different effect on your blood sugar.
Absolutely. And so much of that is even individual. Some people do amazingly well when they eat a whole like plant diet that's really high in those kinds of fibers. Not so much from the grains. People tend not to do as well on the grains, although some, again, there's individuality there. Some grains actually work really well for some people. And there's other people that if they eat all the plants and get all that great fiber, it actually makes them worse. I was one of those people. I was vegetarian for a long time because I didn't feel well when I ate meat. What I didn't know at the time, years and years ago, was that that's because my digestion was off. I wasn't properly breaking down the foods I was taking in. So it felt heavy and I just felt gross after eating like any kind of big meat portion. But that was because my digestion wasn't working right. It wasn't because my body isn't designed to eat meat. I had low stomach acid. I had low digestive enzymes. I had poor eating habits, eating too fast, eating on the go, all of those things. Once I really dialed all those things back in, really dialed in my mitochondrial health and microbiome health, got the gut really working properly. Now I can eat a whole lot more. But I still have to be careful. For me personally, I have to be careful with too much fiber. It actually causes like constipation and bloating and issues for me. So this is another one of those really variable things. Some people do amazing on high fiber.
And
others,
that's me.
not so much.
I'm like the total opposite because I'm predominantly plant-based and I'm the same. I like my body can tell if I haven't gotten a lot of fiber that day, my body will tell me like the flip of a switch. So I am like the total opposite of you, which is like the definition of bio-individuality. Like everybody's fully different. And just understanding, and two, I think it's also a good picture of how everything is connected. Because it's, you're talking about you specifically. It was your blood sugar. It was your digestion. It was your, like all of these things were connected. So knowing that just addressing one isn't really going to fix the whole issue. You had to address your gut microbiome and your, that's going to affect your hormones and your blood sugar. Like it's all connected.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing that I like that you said was you were talking about stress and the effect that cortisol has on your blood sugar. And I think I think that's something else that people don't really like fully grasp, because I think sometimes when people think blood sugar, they think like what we're talking about now with like eating the carbs and the sugar and all that, like, oh, I know that's going to spike my blood sugar. But I don't really think people understand the real long-term effects of living in this chronic stress and how that affects your blood sugar, where you could be eating all the right things. You could be managing your carbs and all that stuff, but you're living in this chronic state of stress and your cortisol is totally driving up your insulin.
Yeah, absolutely. And oddly enough, it can also get imbalanced if you've been high stress for a long time. So you had really high cortisol that's now depleted.
Yep.
And so you can have either too high or too low cortisol and have all of these same problems. Again, this is where testing really comes in, because a lot of the symptoms are the same for high and for low. So you really do have to know. But I think there's two problems with the stress scenario. One is most of us don't feel like we can do anything about it. It's just, that's life today.
Yep.
And the other thing is, I think a lot of us aren't actually aware of how much stress we're dealing with.
Totally.
Like we consciously know it's a problem, but we're not necessarily actively feeling like we're stressed.
Because our body's like adapted to it. It's like, oh, this is normal to be this stressed all the time.
We're just used to it. This is just normal. So it doesn't feel stressed. But it really is impactful on everything, specifically with blood sugar, since that's what we're talking about here. But it really is impacting every aspect of your health. And like you said, until you deal with it, no remedy will work. And so you may blow through a bunch of different diets. You may blow through a bunch of different workout plans, all of the different supplements, all the things. And if you're not addressing these true root causes, none of that's going to work.
Right. For sure. And then the other piece connected to that, because you said this earlier too, the other piece that connects to that stress is the exercise piece. And I've had this conversation with some of my clients before where, obviously we know that exercise is good for our body, but like you're mentioning before, there's like different ends of the spectrum, right? You can go too far and then now you're just stressing your body out even more.
Absolutely. This is another area that's really bio-individual.
Yep.
Some people are literally genetically, physically designed to do a lot of physical activity. Honestly, probably most pro athletes are pushing it too far still, but that's what they get paid to do. But there are people who are designed to do more physical activities, or who are designed to do, like, say, endurance, long-term things. And then there's others that are more short-term, really intense. That's why we have marathoners and sprinters. They're two totally ends of the spectrum. And if you look at their bodies, they're designed totally differently. This is a huge bio-individual thing. Some people can push really hard. They can do high impact and never see a problem. Other people do one high impact workout and they can't walk for 2 weeks. And part of that is because they jumped in too fast, too far. But some of it's just, that's not the kind of workouts all of us should be doing. And so you really do have to find that sweet spot with exercise as well. All of us need it. Everyone needs it. It's just a matter of finding what kind, the intensity, the duration. And I'm a big fan of kind of mixing it up, getting a little bit of both, getting some resistance training, getting some low key walking or yoga, just kind of getting all ends of the spectrum, because they all have a different impact. Some of the low key things can be really good for calming, dealing with some of the stress, helping you like reconnect with your body. And then sometimes the really high intense or difficult workouts are great for like getting out those aggressions. And it's a whole different way of getting rid of stress and burning calories and working your muscles. So I think we need a variety, but we do need to find that sweet spot for how much, how long, how intense for you.
No, I totally agree. And I totally agree with the mixing it up. I'm a huge proponent of that, of doing all the things. I think that's a huge benefit. Because like you said, I mean, they all have benefits and they all have different purposes. So I think, I totally agree with that. So for somebody who's listening, who's like, okay, some of this is kind of ringing a bell. I'm afraid that like, okay, maybe I do have some blood sugar issues. Maybe I do need to like focus on my metabolic health. What are some things people can do? Obviously testing, like you said before, and I'm also a huge proponent of testing. Testing is going to be the thing that gives you like the real data, right? But besides that, if somebody wants to kind of like take some first steps on their own, what are some things that somebody can do now to really like take control of their metabolic health in this realm?
Well, I would start by really taking good stock of what you're doing. What's your food quality look like? How often are you eating? What kinds of foods are you eating? And just really assess, is it optimal? Are there places where you could clean things up? Are there, less trips to fast food or less trips for sugary coffee drinks or sodas? Are there things like that that you could start to whittle out of your life, or at least reduce as much as possible? find some of those really low hanging fruit that try to bring those back into more of the optimal range. If you're already doing a lot of those great things, or you go through and you weed out some of the bad things and you incorporate some more good habits, then I would say start tweaking things. Maybe do a 2 or 3 weeks where you cut carbs a bit, or you only have, say, root vegetables as your carbs instead of, breads or pastas or rices, any of those kinds of things. Maybe you stick to more like potatoes and sweet potatoes and carrots and that kind of thing, and see if that makes a difference. Or cut all of that out and do basically protein and fat for all of your meals for a couple weeks. Just see how you feel. You can't just do this for a day.
Right.
It does take your body a while to adapt to the new plan. So you do need to stick with it for at least a couple of weeks when it comes to big dietary changes like that, if you're going to change those macro ratios really significantly. But you can baby step it. You could maybe have a low carb meal where you don't have a grain or you don't have a starchy vegetable. So you could baby step into it, but just don't expect to feel 1,000% different after a meal or a day. It's going to take a couple weeks to really get your body to adjust, especially if right now you're currently kind of in that sugar burning mode where you're really unable to tap into your body fat when you're not eating, like between meals or overnight. If you're in that sugar burning mode, you need to eat more often because you burn through sugar really quickly. And if you can't then transition into burning your body fat, you're going to be hungry again.
Right.
And so you're going to need to eat quickly again. But once you kind of adapt into being able to switch between those two modes, you'll find your appetite decreases and you can eat less often. You can get back to just eating meals and not snacks.
Right.
You can, really even fast for a long time. You might find days where you're like, wow, I blew right through lunch. Didn't even think about that. I wasn't hungry at all. And that'll just kind of naturally happen for a lot of people. So I would just kind of really take stock of your life with your exercise. Are you over exercising? Are you not doing any? Are you doing the same thing every single day? Where can you make changes? Just sort of take an inventory of all of the things that you're currently doing and be willing to try some things. Try changing up your diet. Try changing up your workouts. Try a different eating schedule or eating less often. There's just a million things you can try to see how that works for you, but just be sure you give it a little time. Now, of course, if you try something and you're like, I literally feel ill, I feel nauseous or shaky, or I'm extra cranky. If you're having really bad side effects that seem dangerous, clearly stop. Listen to your body and don't just push it because I'm saying that you need to give it a couple weeks. But if you're not feeling ill, then, just don't expect miracle results.
Right.
These things do take time to really see the benefits.
Right. And you mentioned macros there. And I did want to ask you about that because I know people are probably wondering, listening to you talk about carbs and fat and all that. Are you a proponent of macro counting? Do you encourage macro counting? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah. I think there's a great time and place for tracking, counting, measuring, all of the things. Mostly in my world, I like using it as either a spot check to just sort of see if you're still on track, because it's really easy to kind of slip and start adding things in that you don't realize you're adding in. Or at the very beginning, when you really aren't all that familiar with what you're eating. You don't actually know if you're eating an optimal amount, or if you're under eating or overeating, or eating too many carbs, or eating too many protein grams, or, whatever that looks like. I think it can be really eye-opening for a period of time to assess where you're at. I think a lot of people have no idea, especially when it comes to carbs, how many they're eating.
Yep, for sure.
And so I think it can be really helpful in that term. But I think if it becomes something that you have to do all the time, then it starts getting into the unhealthy habit stage of now you're obsessive about it, or I don't like going that far. And I also don't think it's a useful chunk of your day. Eventually, most of us kind of have our range of foods that we eat all the time. Why do you need to track that same food 1,000 times?
Every day.
It's going to tell you the same thing it told you yesterday.
Right.
So,
well, and like you said, I like the idea of, and I agree with that too. I have some of my clients do that too. When it's, like you said, kind of the right time and place. But I think too, once you kind of get in your groove and I think too, it also helps with just knowing portion sizes. And I think once you're familiar with portion sizes, then you can just kind of eyeball it. You get familiar with, okay, this is a normal portion of protein, and this is a normal portion. This is, a fat, whatever. And you can kind of get used to just kind of eyeballing it just because you're familiar with your portion sizes. Because like you said, I think a lot of people really don't know. They don't, I think too, when people are eating mindlessly, it adds up, and I just don't realize how much they've added to their day by grazing more often than maybe they should, or, it just kind of ends up being just mindless eating, and I have no idea what they're eating.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also makes it really hard to track.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's really easy to forget those little handful of this and an extra bite of that. I know a lot of moms really struggle with that because they finish off whatever their kids left on their plates and they totally forget to track all that. But that all counts. Everything you put in your body counts. Yeah. Every bite.
Yep, for sure. So do you have, well, actually, let me ask this first. Let's kind of shift gears before I finish up with that question. And what kind of got you into this field of, metabolic health? And I know you're a nutrition therapist and all that. What kind of got you into this realm?
It started, or at least my interest started as a young kid. I was adopted as an infant. My birth family all died very young of heart disease. And so that was kind of always in the back of my mind. I didn't always live the life back in the day, but I was always like, I'm concerned about heart disease in my future. I still gained weight. I still ate sleeves of Chips Ahoy cookies and animal crackers dipped in frosting. And I did all the things as a teen because we're dumb when we're kids. But so that was kind of what started it. In my mid-20s, I had a really comprehensive cardiac panel done through my employer at the time, where they did like the carotid scans and they did EKGs and they did all these things. And they found that my arterial age was 11 years older than I actually was. And I already had plaques forming in my mid-20s. Yeah. So that was kind of my, I really am on that same path. And if I followed in those same footsteps of my birth family, the women died younger than 50.
Wow.
So I was halfway through my life.
Yeah.
That was like, wait, what? I haven't done anything yet. Like, I had only just started that career and it was like, so that was my big wake up call. So still in my 20s, you just start working out more and you start paying attention a little bit more and it works. And then it doesn't work anymore because you're not in your 20s anymore. And so I started, following the same plan, started gaining the weight back. My acne came back. Like all of the things that I was originally trying to get rid of all came back. My cholesterol started climbing again. I now know more that it probably wasn't as risky as I thought it was at the time, but still it woke me up that clearly this wasn't the right path.
Right.
So that's when I transitioned to more plant-based eating because I also realized that I didn't feel great when I was eating this, big protein thing. And that worked for a long time for me. Being all plant-based, I was never fully vegan. I still did some eggs and cheese and some stuff, occasional seafood, that kind of thing. But it was primarily vegetarian and it was a whole foods vegetarian diet. This was not Oreos and Doritos. This was, this was vegetables and, it was all good stuff, but still pretty heavy in grains and heavy in, a wide variety of vegetables and a lot of fruit. And that worked for a long time. And then again, the weight started coming back on and I started getting really bloated and my muscles were so chronically sore that I literally had to stop working out. My feet hurt so bad. I thought I had plantar fasciitis. I didn't know what the heck was going on. It hurt just to walk. Wow. Like it was insane. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? I can't eat any cleaner.
Right.
Like it was already, as good as it could possibly be. So that's when I turned to the functional testing, which ultimately took me down this path. And that's when I, learned all the stuff about the fact that I was insulin resistant, the fact that I had a completely wiped out gut, even eating all of those plants and all of those amazing prebiotics. I had almost no but gut bacteria. And the ones I did have were all bad.
Wow.
I had H. pylori in my stomach that was depleting my stomach acid and causing all the downstream digestive issues. I was chronically constipated. Like I had all the problems. And I was insulin resistant, which at the time made no sense to me until it was pointed out that plants are all carbs. I was basically eating all carbs. So even though they were all great carbs, they were all carbs.
Right.
I was really low in overall protein intake. I was really low in healthy fat intake. So I had all kinds of nutrient deficiencies. I had all kinds of fat soluble vitamin problems because I wasn't eating fat. You can't absorb fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K without fat.
Right.
So I was low in like a million things and it was just not good for me. So that's what got me started on the path. Ultimately, I went to school to, learn this at a deeper level and mostly to fix my own health. And then, it kind of turned into the business side of it as well.
Yeah.
Because it keeps me going. And I love sharing this information because I think a lot of people are suffering and they don't need to.
Exactly. I love it. And I feel like that's such a common story is it always starts out as healing ourselves and then realizing like, we want to help other people heal themselves because you're right. We don't have to be, we don't have to live sick. We don't have to feel sick. We don't have to feel like, I love that. It's such a good lesson. And then you're able to use, all the wisdom you learn along the way to help everybody else on their own healing journey. And it's such a good, reciprocal. I love it. Yeah. Such a good story. I love it. Okay. So I do want to ask you one question, but before I do that, can you let everybody know where to find you and where to find out more about everything that you're doing and all of that?
Yeah. The hub of all of my stuff is on my website. So healthylifewithandrea.com, all spelled out. And from that page, you can find my podcast. You can find my email list. I send out informational tips and information like that, education, inspiration, all of those things weekly. And I also have some free content on there. I have, some of my favorite products and things that I use personally that have made a big impact in my own health journey. And then, of course, you can always reach out if you would like to schedule a consultation or if you just have questions that you want to run by me.
Perfect.
It's all on the website.
Awesome. And I'll put that in the show notes, of course. And the question I want to ask you to kind of finish things up is, what is one thing that you can do to live with purpose?
I think living with purpose is a thing we don't talk about enough. This could be an entire podcast just about how to tap into your purpose. I think this is one of those things that we all need to do. And I personally think it starts with your health because you can't put yourself fully into anything without feeling your best. And when you feel your best, you can show up your best for the world and you can live that purpose more fully. So I think starting with your health really is the key to dialing in your purpose. And that will either illuminate what your purpose is or really help you fully step into it.
Amen. I love it. It's so good. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing your wisdom. And I know people got a lot of tangible takeaways here to kind of help get them on the right track with their metabolic health. So thank you for sharing all the things and for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
For sure. Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.